Still can praise and worship the same. Couple announcements I want to do before I do the morning prayer. We're going to do a service Sabbath today after church. And we're actually going to help the church that runs here on Sundays lets us use their facilities. So we're going to stay here. They have quite a few things that need to be done. And it's an older church group, so we're going to stay and try to, we brought our bobcat from the farm and we got power washers and some stuff. We're just going to do some maintenance stuff that they're kind of needing to have done. So anybody that would like to stay and help, we have water, we have stuff to clean up when you're done. Feel free to stay if you want, or just stay and fellowship with us too. That would be fine also. And then also June 8th is our blood drive. I just encourage people to, if you're planning on doing it, going on, signing up for a time so the times don't fill up. But that will be right after church on the 8th. Food will be provided for anybody that comes, so feel free to do that as well if you like. So if we want to pray, we'll get started today. Father, I just want to thank you for giving us this opportunity to come together today. I want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to reach out into the community and to do some service today too, to reach out to some fellow people who are in need of help, and we're able to give that to them. I just pray that you be with us today while we do that service, and pray that we do it in your name and that we glorify you while we do it. I also want to pray for our blood drive that's coming up. We were able to save 51 lives last time we did it, so I'm hoping that we can reach out and do another good service with that as well. Bless Alex as he speaks to us today. May we hear what he has to say and take that to heart and take it with us as we leave. I pray for Kevin as he does our worship songs this morning. May we hear your word in that as well. In your name we pray. Amen. Oops. Also, Kevin has a welcome song. So we're going to read it up and we kind of just greet everybody, say hello. He sings a nice little tune for us. So it's just getting to know the people that we're going to church with. So.
All right, so let's all stand up. Kind of taking a risk this morning with songs I chose, because all of them I had never played up front before. But they're just, I've known them for, and they're such great songs that I like to learn. Especially the last song. When you get to the last song, you might find it hard to follow the verses, but once you get used to it, but I just love the words and I love the chorus as well. So that should be the chorus. But we're going to start with how deep the Father's love for us.
How great the pain of searing blows. The Father turned his face away, as wounds which mar the chosen one bring many sons to glory. Behold the man upon a cross, my sin upon his shoulders. Ashamed I hear my mocking voice call out among the scoffers. It was my sin that held him there, until it was accomplished. His tiny breath has brought me life. I know that it is finished. I will not boast in anything. No grace, no power, nor wisdom, but I will boast in Jesus Christ, his death and resurrection. Why should I gain from his reward? I cannot give an answer, but this I know with all my heart. His wounds have paid my ransom. His wounds have paid my ransom. and my heart will sing how great is our God. How great is our God. Sing with me how great is our God. All will see how great is our God. 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 Sing with me, how great is our God, and all will see how great is our God. Here in this worn and grieving land, many dream has died. A tree planted by the water, we never will run dry. So living water flowing through, God we thirst for more of you. Fill our hearts and flood our souls with one desire. Just to know you, learn to make you known. We lift your name on high. Shine like the sun in darkness, run and hide. We know we were made for so much more than ordinary lives. It's time for us to more than just survive. We were made to thrive. Into your word we're digging deep, just know our Father's heart. To the world we're reaching out to show them who you are. So living water flowing through, God we thirst for more of you. Fill our hearts and flood our souls with one desire. Just to know you and to make you known. We lift your name on high. Shine like the sun, make darkness run and hide. We know we were made for so much more than ordinary lives. It's time for us to more than just survive. We were made to thrive. Joy unspeakable, faith unspeakable, love unstoppable, anything is possible. Joy unspeakable, faith unspeakable, love unstoppable, anything is possible. Joy unspeakable, faith unspeakable, love unstoppable, anything is possible. Just to know you, learn to make you known. We lift your name on high. Shine like the sun, make darkness run and hide. We know we were made for so much more than ordinary lives. It's time for us to more than just survive. We were made to thrive.
morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but I survived the semester. and after I survived the semester, I had to start prepping for a sermon right after that. So thanks, Fred. Appreciate it. You know when the leader of the church is a professor, because they just keep adding more work. No, I know that the teachers look forward to summer just as much as the students do. And my wife is a teacher, and I've worked in academies before, so I know. I invite you guys to bow your heads in prayer with me. Father in heaven, we want to give you thanks for the Sabbath day. And for those of us who are here, although we're few, God, we give you thanks for every person that is here. We thank you that you have brought us together to worship you, to hear your word. We thank you for the songs that we sang. And now, Lord, as we hear your word, we pray that you may speak to us. Lord, that your presence may descend into this place like fire in the day of Pentecost that consumes us, Lord. Lord, if we leave this place the same way we came in, we got up and got ready for absolutely nothing. So, God, we ask that you speak to our hearts. And we pray this in the name of Jesus. Amen. All right, I invite you to Matthew chapter 23. Matthew chapter 23. I'll give you a second to find it. Matthew chapter 23. And while we are looking for Matthew 23, I want to remind everyone that we have a treasure box in the back that is it's hungry for donations. So if the Lord so moves you to worship financially and to give, we invite you to do so. Matthew chapter 23, and we're going to read from verses 1 to 12. Then Jesus said to the crowds and to his disciples, "The teachers of the law and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. So you must be careful to do everything they tell you. But do not do what they do, for they do not practice what they preach. They tie up heavy, cumbersome loads and put them on other people's shoulders, but they themselves are not willing to lift a finger to move them. Everything they do is done for people to see. They make their phylacteries wide and the tassels of their garments long. They love the place of honor at banquets and the most important seats in the synagogues. They love to be greeted with respect in the marketplaces and to have people call them rabbi. But you are not to be called rabbi, for you only have one master, and you are all brothers. And do not call anyone on earth Father, for you have one Father, and he is in heaven. Nor are you to be called teacher, for you have one teacher, the Messiah. The greatest among you will be a servant. For those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted." This is good news. Amen. This is being recorded, right? Yes. Okay, so I'm going to omit names. So, a few years ago, my second assignment as a pastor was a church in the west end of the city. I was assigned to be the assistant pastor there. And, you know, people get excited when a new pastor comes, especially when he's young, cool, good looking, talented. Humble. I too am extremely humble. And I was preaching one Sabbath, and I preached on the gospel. I can't remember what specific sermon it was, but I know it was a gospel sermon. And at the end of the service, one of the elders came up to me with this joy in his eyes. So you know that little bright light. There's a visitor here. You know, kind of like, we haven't had these in a long time. You know, there's a visitor here, and he heard your message, and he says he's really moved, and he wants to talk with you. I'm going to bring him to you. So it's like, kind of telling me, don't drop the ball on this one. So I'm like, okay. So he leads this man up to me, and I remember exactly what he was wearing. I could remake his outfit. He was wearing flip-flops. Actually, he was wearing slides. They weren't even flip-flops, they were slides. And he was wearing cargo shorts, and he was wearing a Hawaiian shirt, and he was older gentleman, he looked like he was between 70 and 80 years old, maybe, like in that age range. So he was up there, and he had like a real messy hair, and he had a helmet in his hand. So he clearly rode his bike to church. And we talked for about half an hour, and you know, after when you're a pastor of like one of these bigger churches, everyone wants to talk with you, you know. So I told him, hey, you know, I'd love for us to keep talking. Let's make an appointment, and we'll go out for coffee, and we'll talk. And we did, and we went out several times for coffee. We talked about Jesus. We talked about God. We talked about faith. And one day he said, I want you to attend this service with me, because he apparently had been going to different churches, and he had gone to this Anglican church that was called All Saints Church. And I passed by Anglican All Saints Church all the time. And I said, yeah, sure, I'll go to this worship service with you. And it was a really cool service, because if anyone's ever been to an Anglican church, they go through like the whole liturgy like Catholic churches do, but they're Protestant. And everything is done from the center. It's not done like there's people up front. And everything is done from the center. And there was a band playing music, original church liturgical music, but the band was to the side. The band wasn't up front leading. They were like to the side. And the congregation, as the congregation had grown, they all knew the music because the music had been written in the congregation. And then the pews, like all across, down the pews, there were just bicycles because everyone rode their bikes to church. It was the coolest, like, it was the most hipster church I had ever attended. And I thought it was amazing. I thought the church was like so great. I enjoyed myself very much. And at the end of the service, him and I were standing outside the church, and as we're talking, he has a ring in his hand. And he, you know, people talk with their hands. And he kept mentioning his partner. And you know, you start probing. Like, tell me about your partner. Tell me. You know, I start asking deeper questions because I want to get to know this man. You know, because eventually I want to minister to this man because he clearly has been reaching out. And finally, we kind of like go to a local coffee shop. We sit down that was really close by, and we talk. And we talked for a long time. And the man told me his life story. And I, as a pastor, I've sat down with many people and they've told me their life story. But this man's story, for some reason, it was just like one of those stories that just kind of stick with you. They just kind of grab onto you. And this was his story. His father was actually a Seventh-day Adventist pastor. But his parents got divorced. And when his parents divorced, his father left the church, his mom left the church. He mostly stuck around with his mother, but his father, but all the relationships were kind of like strained after the divorce. While everyone kind of fell away from the faith, he didn't. He stayed in the faith. So he went to an Adventist college. And going to this Adventist college, this is the moment when he kind of told me something. He told me something that I had kind of been building up to the fact that he kept saying my partner. And he told me that he was gay, that he was homosexual. And he told me how when he was in college, he struggled being like, I'm a committed Christian, I want to be a Seventh-day Adventist, but I'm gay. So he says that he prayed to God like anything while he was in school, and he described to me that he lost 50 pounds fasting, just almost wasted his body away fasting, that God would take this thing away from him. And he says, but God never did. So he met another girl while he was in school, and she was lesbian, and they kind of opened up to each other. And they were both in that same predicament. They both wanted to be faithful to God, but they both didn't want to. They both were struggling with this reality of who they were. So they said to each other, why don't we get married to one another, and this way we'll hold each other accountable for life. And that's what they did. So they got married, they had kids, they built a life together. And they were married for over 40 years. They were married for over 40 years. Built a life together, had kids, bought a home, until finally they somewhere at the end of the 40 years, this whole time, they've been struggling with this reality that I'm gay, I'm lesbian. So they finally called it quits. And they waited for all their kids to get a college education, to get them all through, and they got divorced. And when he divorced his wife, he says that that's the moment that he lost his faith. That was the moment. That was like the breaking point. He's like, I've done all this my whole life, and God still has not answered. And he just kind of gave it all up. And a few years after his divorce, he met this other gentleman, and now he's living his gay life, and he got married. And 5 years after he got married, he found a Bible in his house that he hadn't opened up in a long time. And he just whipped it open to the Gospels and just started reading the Gospels. And he told me, he's like, man, and when I read this, I was like, I don't know if Jesus is real. I don't know if he's real. I don't know if he's really God. I don't know any of that. But all I know is that this man is very important, especially what he has to say. So the man went to a local seminary, got a master's in divinity, graduated, and now he holds a group in the city where he tries to provide healing for people in the city who've been hurt, all based on the teachings of Jesus. He doesn't know where he stands with Jesus, but he knows that this man's teachings bring healing, and he's using that as a model for his own independent ministry in the city. And he said to me that lately he's been going church to church because he wants to hear God speak. Because he wants to have that one who's like, okay, like, how is it that I've been going my whole life where God hasn't answered me yet? Surrounded around this man, I have found so much healing, yet I can't seem to figure out if he's real. So he's been going around church to church trying to hear God. But what the catalyst for his desire to go church to church was that the man that he was married to was dying. And once this man died, he was going to be on his own again. And he said that he was going church to church trying to hear God, to let him know that despite all this, he was still there with him. He's still trying to find God all these years later. And he said to me, the reason out of all the churches that you're the guy I'm talking to, because I heard God speak to me when you spoke. And he asked me, when is the next time you're preaching? And the next time I was going to preach was going to be the following week. And I was preaching at a church on the north end of the city as a guest speaker for their communion service. And I did not want to tell him that I was preaching there, not only because it was communion service, but because it was the most conservative church in the entire city. And when I say the most conservative church, I mean this church is so conservative that at the time, my conference president, at our pastor's meeting, he had just gone to that church the Saturday before, and the first thing he did was he was complaining to all the pastors how angry he was about how the church rebuked him for not chewing his food enough. This is a true story. And I was invited to be the guest speaker to lead and to officiate the communion service. And I didn't want to put him in this situation because as a Seventh-day Adventist and as a pastor, I understand my community. I understand my people, you know. I can adjust myself, but I don't want to put this man through this. But against my better judgment, I told him that I was going to be speaking, but I didn't tell him that it was going to be communion service. And the man shows up. He comes, again, with slides, cargo shorts, Hawaiian shirt, messy hair, and he sits right in the middle. And here's the interesting thing that, you know, like usually when you're a guest, you kind of hide in the back. You know, this man went right in the middle and sat with the people. You gotta imagine, everyone's wearing suits and ties, and this man in cargo shorts sits in the middle of them. Like, no shame. I mean, when you get to this point in your life, you just don't care anymore. And I preached a sermon, and I remember the sermon I preached for that day. It was a sermon of the Passover. And it was a sermon about how the Hebrew word that says that bread that they were supposed to make, the unleavened bread, in Hebrew there's this idea that the bread is both sweet, but it has bitter herbs on top of it. If you read it, it says it has bitter herbs. The bread is sweet, but it has bitter herbs. The Israelites, the night before leaving Egypt, the night before the firstborns in Egypt would die, would eat a bitter, sweet bread. Not only was the bread unleavened because they wouldn't have time to let the bread rise because the salvation would be so quick. Not only were they supposed to take their Passover with their shoes on and their cloaks because their salvation was going to be so quick they had to be ready to go, but the very food that they were going to eat was symbolizing what their salvation was going to be like. Yes, it's sweet that we're being saved, but at the same time it's bitter because of how many will suffer for you to be saved. And when we think of like how we're saved, it's bittersweet. Oh, praise the Lord that Jesus has saved us and that he comforts us, but it's bitter because we know the suffering that provided our salvation. I remember that was my sermon. And for you guys who know me, I'm very emotional. I was like, let me give me a second, I need to get through this, tears in my eyes. Communion always gets me. And I thought that he was going to sneak off and leave, but he comes and finds me and he says, I want to wash your feet. And this is an old man. He can barely get down on his knees. So we're about to wash our feet, and I wash his feet first. And then he washes my feet. And he's trying to get down. I'm like, oh, no, don't worry about going down. You know, like, it's okay if you can't get down. He goes, no, I have to get down on my knees. And he gets down on both his knees, like straight up, like knees on the ground, sitting on his bum. And he washes my feet, looking at me dead in the eyes the whole time, with tears in his eyes. And we prayed. We went upstairs, we took the bread, we took the wine, and after the service, he came up to me, and of course, he's still like tears in his eyes. And he says to me, I know I have a home in God now, but what makes me sad is that I know I'll never have a home in the church. Oh! not supposed to be true, but I knew that it was true. In my last year that I was pastoring, Chelsea kind of remembers all the stress I was going through because there was a transgender person in my church. And the person already knew that no one agreed, but he, she, whatever pronoun you want to use, said, I just want to be here to worship. You don't have to give me any responsibility. Just let me sit there and listen. And then I went to my board meeting, and I remember that there was a group of people that told me, the pastor, they said, either she goes or we go. And I remember I was so angry. I was so angry, and I knew, I gotta watch my words right now. Righteous indignation. And I said to them, if not here, then where? If they will not meet God here, then where will they meet Him? You want me to send them down the street to the Methodist church? You want me to send them to the Catholic church, the Lutheran church? Who would you rather invite them to Jesus? If not here, if they can't encounter Jesus here, what do you want me to do? I didn't get an answer. They just kind of quick changed the subject and went off this whole other thing that I'm not going to go into because I'll get angry all over again. And now I'm not trying to make a statement about what's right and what's wrong, whether LGBTQ is right or wrong. But the reason I share this story is because I feel like it highlights so perfectly what it means to not be a servant. What it means when the church is not a servant. When we are not servants. You know, like in this passage that we just read in Matthew chapter 23, Jesus says like this double negative, like, yeah, listen to the Pharisees, just don't do what they do. In other words, what they're saying is right, but don't do what they do. You know, it's like, yeah, what the churches are saying is right, but don't do what they're doing. You know, like what's coming out of their mouth, it's great. 3 angels' message, Sabbath, state of the dead, that's all great, but what they're doing, don't do that. Don't do that. And then in verse 5, everything they do is for people to see. They make their phylacteries, and what a phylactery is, if anyone is familiar with Judaism, there's some Jews that wear this little hat on their heads, like a little box, and in it has like Bible texts in it, and and it has Bible texts like keep the law of God within your heart, and the whole thing. It's like a pious thing that you're keeping God's law within your heart all of the time. So sometimes like a little box, but what Jesus is saying is here is like they make their phylacteries wide. They put this huge box on their head so that people can know for sure that they got the law of God in their hearts. Mercy. And their tassels, which is what's commanded in the book of Numbers, they make those things long. They love the place of honor at banquets and most important seats in synagogues. They love to be greeted with respect in the marketplaces and for people to call them rabbi. And I remember when I first became a pastor, man, if someone didn't call me pastor, I'd get so mad. Like, who am I, man? Who am I? I'm Alex. I'm nobody. But you, now here, like, really consider this last part here. Why else would you be going to school to be a pastor except to be called pastor? Why else would you get a doctorate except to be able to be called doctor? And Jesus says here, you are not to be called rabbi. Then why are they following a rabbi for they themselves to become rabbis if they're not to be called rabbis? Don't call anyone master. You're brothers. Do not call anyone father, for you only have one Father in heaven. You are not to be called teacher. What? I'm not to be called teacher? Professor? for you only have one teacher. In other words, Jesus is saying, like, all these titles that separate you, that try to bring you up, bring them all down. For the greatest among you will be a servant. The greatest among you will be a servant. You know, we say this so much in church, is like, become a servant, become a servant. And to me, what bothers me about how we say this is that oftentimes the way we use this, like, concept of being a servant, is the way we use the Great Commission. Like, I remember going to mega churches, and they want $5 million to build a new sanctuary. Or there was this other church I went to, they wanted to do a satellite church, their mega church, and they wanted to raise $10 million in 6 years. And then the whole time they were quoting Matthew chapter 28, go on to all the world and make disciples of all nations. And I'm like, what is $10 million sanctuary have to do with Matthew 28? And to me, what bugs me is the way we use the concept of servant is the same way, but it's so low-key. Because when we say become a servant, what we mean is volunteer at your church more. You know, lead song service more. Do a greeting. You know what I'm talking about. That's what we, you know, well, that's great and all. The church is not the one who needs to be served. You know, when Jesus says here, the greatest among you will be a servant, what he means is that his people live a life that does what servants do. And what do servants do? Servants meet the needs of others. That is what a servant does. A servant meets the need of another. And you see, the moment when I washed that man's feet, the reason that impacted me so much is because out of all people, this man exemplified what foot washing really meant. Because by God's grace, we are all sinners saved by grace. Washed by his blood, we're really saints washing other saints' feet because of Jesus. But this man was no saint. Not only was he not baptized, he's living a life that the church would consider sinful. He's not a church member. He's not part of the community. And here I am washing his feet. And he has no ties to Jesus, yet he's washing my feet. If anything, this is as close as it comes to washing a sinner's feet. I washed a sinner's feet. And at that moment, he said, I have no home in the church, but I have a home in God. But yet somehow, what he's telling me is, I feel at home with you. You know how terrible is the church really a servant if people can't find a home in the church? That's how you know that the church is not a servant. When people don't feel comfortable coming to church because of differences. You know, like a servant doesn't tell the master, hey, you know, before I serve you, you need to change a few things here. You need to change those sheets, and then I'll wash the pillows. Like, no, the servant does what he needs to do in order for this person to be served. They see that there's a need. They see that there's not enough water in the cup. They fill it. They see that there's not enough bread on their plate. They refill it. They see that they're cold, so they bring a blanket. They see that they're hungry, so they feed them. What does it mean to be a servant? To be a servant means that you meet the needs of others. This is the vision that Jesus has for the church. And you know that a church is not serving when they ask the people who they're supposed to be serving to change before they'll serve them. That's how you know. That's how you know the church is not serving, when we're stubborn and hold on to things even though it's what prevents us from reaching the people who we're trying to reach. See, those who exalt themselves will be humbled, verse 12. And those who humble themselves will be exalted. What does it mean to be a servant? It means that you live a life that meets the needs of others. It means to live a life that meets the needs of others. See, in my marriage, I'm a servant. And that's the way it should be. For all of us. It's not that one is a servant. We're all servants to each other. We're all serving one another. Not just us who are in the church, but especially to those who are in our community, especially to those who are outside the church. It is a church that can live selflessly for the needs of others. When we live in the vision, the apocalyptic vision that Christ has for the kingdom of God. And I believe that that's what we're trying to do here at our church, right? That's why we do blood drives. That's why we're going to fix the church today wherever it is that we can. Because we recognize that it is better to stay low to the ground and wait for God to exalt us than for us to exalt ourselves. May we become servants that meet the needs of others. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we want to give you thanks for our community. Lord, you give us a vision for the kingdom of God that is difficult. It'd be great if the vision that it would have been easy if the vision that you gave us was for us to follow a set of rules, to live our lives a certain way. God, that would have been easy. But no, God, the calling that you have on us is that we may become servants. The real challenge is for us to put our pride down, that we may humble ourselves as you did in becoming flesh. Lord, help us have the heart that was in Christ Jesus, one of a servant that meets the needs of others, that those who are outsiders may be able to find a home in our communities. And this is our prayer in the wonderful name of Jesus. Amen.
Thank you for the message, Alex. So at this point in time in our service, we usually open up the floor for anyone who has a prayer request or praise report. Anything happened to you this week? Anything you want to thank God for, or something you want us to pray about collectively? So I'm opening up the floor for everybody. Anybody who has anything they want to pray about? Go ahead, Chris.
Praise that finals are over. That's
Okay,
what
amen. Hallelujah. Amen.
Huge praise for that.
Alright.
Also prayer requests for a lot of, friends, people who are graduating, who are like a major transition point in their life. So God believe that.
Amen. Amen. Absolutely. Okay. Anybody else? Yeah, Chris.
I want to thank God for Noel Stars getting here safely today.
Yes, it's good to see them. Yes, amen. Good to see you guys. Yes. Amen. Amen.
a real home. But until then, so I'm thankful for this church.
I have a praise and a prayer. The praise would be for Alex, because I wish more people could hear what he has to say, because I do think that that is a huge struggle. And anybody that knows me knows it's a huge struggle for me anyways. So I praise him for being brave enough to have that conversation, because I think a lot of times it does get shoved under the rug, like he said even in his meeting. But I think it's something that needs to be talked about, which leads into my prayer, because I hope that people will leave here not only with the thought of serving and what that means, but to think about the people that need to be served, because I think that we shun those people a little bit. I think that the people that aren't in the suits or up to par or baptized or, you know, a member of a church, I feel like those are the people that we shun away from, and those are the people that we should be serving. So I hope we all leave maybe remembering to reach out to the people that we may not do normally.
Anybody else? Oh, Sean.
I just want to praise the Lord. We had a group start at my work. We meet once a week at lunchtime, and there are people of many different faiths, and it's fun because rather than worrying about doctrine and who believes in what, we just come and praise the Lord. And I think as much as he's being cut out of church and work and not allowed to be brought up everywhere, it's like I get weepy every time we have this meeting. I'm like, yes, this is awesome. Victory for the Lord.
Amen. Amen. That's very good. That's very good. Thank God for that. Kevin?
I've got some cousins stuff I want to keep in mind. Is also Mother's Day.
Cousins?
This last week.
Cousin? Okay.
My dad's sister passed away this week.
Anybody else?
One real quickly. Just people in our church, our home church, there's a couple of them are dealing with cancer right now. And so the new development there, just keep in.
Anybody? Oh! Jonas, right? Jonas? Yes, Jonas. To eat. Good stuff. That's important. I like it. Good stuff, Jonas. All right. All right, guys, let us pray. Our Father in heaven, we come to you in gratitude. We thank you for so many things in our lives. We cannot possibly put in words all the things that we are grateful for on a daily basis. We are grateful today for the message of our brother Alex, the message of service, the message that your one and only Son came to this earth to share with us a life of exemplary service, a life of service so much so that he gave his life for his friends. Our Father in heaven, I pray that you be with us, help us, guide us, provide us with the Holy Spirit to continue to lead us in the path upon which you want us to go. I want to pray especially this morning for our members, those who are grateful to you for exams being done, those who are praying for those who are not here, those who are traveling. We thank you that Nolan's parents are able to make it here, Norma and Martin. We thank you for traveling mercies for them. And I pray that you be with them through the events of this weekend and grant them traveling mercies back home. I want to pray and thank you for the little things, the things we take for granted sometimes. Our little brother Jonas is sharing with us the privilege that he has to be able to have things to eat at home and that you have been providing for his family. We thank you for our children who are growing up, who are getting older. A year celebrated, an additional birthday, a reminder that we are on this earth for a short time as well, and that the time that we have here, we should live a life of service to those around us. I also want to thank you for those of us who are trying to do our best to open up our hearts, to love those around us, those who may or may not agree with what we believe in, but those who are here, your children you have put here on earth. I pray you be with those who have lost loved ones, for Mark and his family, Kevin's cousins. I pray you be with them as they grieve the loss of a loved one. I pray you provide them with the comfort that they need to get through the process. And we have been promised, we know that someday you're going to come and take us home. Just like our brother Martin has reminded us, this is not our home. We belong somewhere else. We're here for a short time. We look forward to the day that you come back and take us to our permanent abode. I also want to pray, Father in heaven, that you continue to be with this church. We have a mission. We have our service plan for what we want to do in our community. Please give us the strength, give us the Holy Spirit, give us the guidance, give us the perseverance to be able to keep moving forward. You have promised us that the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. We pray for more workers. We pray that you be with us to continue to be an example to those around us, like Shauna also reminded us about the service at church, at work, where they come together at lunchtime to just praise your name and to study together and to just worship you and acknowledge your presence. Please be with us in our lives. Be with those who still have classes, those who have exams this coming week. I pray for those who are still struggling with whatever challenges that they have in their lives, that you continue to guide them and provide them with comfort. I pray for the food we're about to eat this afternoon. I pray for the fellowship that we have together. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, just a reminder, so we always have lunch together, so please feel free. You are invited, not feel free. You are invited to stick around and have lunch with us. And obviously we have our service afternoon after lunch, but please join us. Thank you so much, guys. Alex. sorry, yeah, yeah.